Constraints in business are a good thing. That's essentially what this whole episode is going to be about. We're going to be talking about embracing those constraints and using them to help you focus and go a little bit further, rather than doing what most people do, which is pissing and moaning that they can't do something because of X, Y, and Z. Instead, you should embrace those things as boundaries to almost protect what you're trying to do, and then maximize what you can do in the now smaller constrained circle. And John was absolutely right before he went down the Tinder rabbit hole. You got to know what you want. You got to know what your limits are, and then you got to decide what you can and will achieve.
I'm glad you didn't say you went down the grinder hole. I'm really glad you didn't say that.
Very careful.
Yeah, because I mean, to give a concrete example of this, when you see, say, on LinkedIn and people's tagline or their headline, whatever you like to call it, and they'll say things like, I don't know, proofreader, copywriter, fucking flower arranger. They got a massive broad range. They're basically saying, I've got a dozen different skills and I do anything for money. And I get why they do it, you know,
desperation.
But yeah, I'll do anything for money. But you know, you'll do far more business and you'll be far more successful if you narrow down your focus like a laser beam. I'm not saying laser focus because lasers don't focus, but if you narrow it down like a laser beam, you get a lot. You know, so you could become. You know, imagine you're a dog sitter. Okay, you earn so much, but if you become a dog sitter who specialises in aggressive Rottweilers, you know, if the population in your town is big enough, you make a lot more money because you can charge a premium. Because I can deal with fucking aggressive Rottweilers.
But John, I've now got a smaller target market. I have fewer people to sell to.
Yeah, so instead of like having 10,000 dogs to sell to or dog owners to sell to, you've got 1,000. You can never sell.
You only need 10, you fucking idiot.
Yeah, you need, to all intents and purposes, with very rare exception, your target market, and I don't care what you do, even if you were to sell fucking prosthetics to one-legged people, your target market, because there are millions of them in the world at least, your target market is, to all intents and purposes, infinite, because it's orders of magnitude bigger than you can ever possibly sell to or serve. You know, even like a big business like Amazon, say selling books, their market, they still don't sell to everyone who buys books. A lot of people won't buy books from Amazon and stuff. You know? So even someone like Amazon doesn't sell to everyone who reads books or indeed buys anything else online.
There's riches in the niches.
There are riches in niches, as the Americans
are going to say. Riches in the niches, and South Africans. That's what that was meant to be.
That was more like a Brummie, that was. You know what I mean? Sounds like you're from Birmingham.
Yeah,
want to come back to my hut?
Riches in the niches.
So, yeah, you need to know what you want.
You do.
Really.
You do. And a lot of this comes down, a lot of the complaints I hear about constraints is around projects and things that people want to do. Oh, I really want to do this, but I don't have the time. Oh, I really want to do this, but I don't have the money. I really want to do this, but I don't have the right equipment, the right people. Oh, I really want to do this, but I haven't got the right technological knowledge. Or if I do this thing, it's going to break down my tech, but I really want to do it. Or I really want to do this thing, but I don't have enough knowledge. Rather than seeing these things as reasons not to undergo the project, instead imagine you can do anything. Now, the things that you can't do and the things that you're seeing as constraints, they allow you to carve out a very small portion of that everything, which means you can no longer do everything. You can only do some things. And knowing you can do something inside of those constraints is far better than sitting there and going, well, I can do anything. Because if you feel like you can do anything, you often do nothing at all. If you embrace those constraints and ask yourself, well, what can I do in relation to this thing that I want to do with a budget of £100, working an hour a day, with me, myself, and I, and only my laptop because I've got no more equipment, with these tech equipments and the knowledge that I have, you'll be able to come up for an answer with that. You will. And then rather than focus on, I can't do it, because you're going to be like, I'm going to build this thing because I have these resources.
What can I do? There's a really kind of funny apocryphal story, or a bit of a colloquialism, I suppose, here in Ireland, which is, you know, you're out in the middle of nowhere and you stop a farmer and say, how do I get to Cork? How do I get to Cork? And he'll go, you don't want to try to get there from here, you know, meaning it's complicated. But this is where you are, so this is where you have to start from. And it's the same with that. I mean, you have to deal with what you have. And I do know people. I mean, a good example, I actually wrote an email about it this morning, or for this morning, is people say to me, I would give anything to solve this problem. I would give anything to get better clients and sell at premium rates. I'd give anything to give my family, my partner, my kids the life I promised them when I started this business. I'd do anything. I'd do anything. So then I tell them how much work's involved, not so much the quantity, but how uncomfortable it is. And then I tell them how much we charge. And then I tell them it means stepping on toes, ruffling feathers, rocking boats, slaughtering sacred cows. And all of a sudden, it's not that important anymore.
Yeah. Oh, no.
No. So,
Forget I said anything.
It's just bullshit excuses, and the excuse they normally give is, "Oh, it's too expensive." The money is never really a problem. Not if you seriously listen to what we teach. Yeah. When we've got people who, I mean, I want to say it's not quite routinely, I suppose. That's to be fair, but it's not unusual for our clients to start charging 10 times or more what they were charging before. I can think of at least 3 people off the top of my head who've done it recently, or at least have said they're doing it recently. Well, anyone can do it. If one person can sell at 10 times their current rate, it means pretty much most people probably can take a stab. And if you can't do 10, you might do 5 or 3 or even 2. But to say you can't afford it, well, that's because you're looking at paying us from your current business. Well, your current business is shit. That's what you're talking to us, you fucking muppet.
Constraints shouldn't be limiting. And for those people that are listening, thinking, well, whenever I go into a project, I'm really optimistic. I don't even look at the constraints. I've got money, I've got staff, I've got the time. If that's the case, you should voluntarily bring on constraints. Asking, how do we build a marketing funnel is pretty broad and focused, and probably gets you 101 answers, John, doesn't it? If someone came to you and said, how do I build a marketing funnel for my company? You'll go, well, where do I begin? Have you got all day? There's 100 different ways to do it. But if someone comes to you and says, I've got a problem. We currently have no hands-off, uniform way of winning new leads, nurturing them, and asking them to make a purchase. So how do we build a marketing funnel? I've got £10,000. I can only give it an hour a day. And I've got no idea how to code or write copy, but I do have a really good person on the phone. All of a sudden, those constraints, well, they help you build a far better solution, don't they? So problem-focused projects where you can clearly define the problem that you're solving and then introduce the constraints to the solution that you're going to come up with creates for far better project management and project implementation.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is down to asking the right questions. Now, people like Tony Robbins and others, Stephen Covey, are often credited with being the gurus who said things like, the quality of your life will depend on the quality of your questions. Now, they may have said those words verbatim, but the idea goes back at least 2,300 years to the likes of Socrates and Plato.
Yeah.
So please, guys, please, gurus, you didn't make this shit up. Stop pretending you fucking did, all right? But the more questions you ask yourself, and if you think about it, those kinds of questions are themselves necessarily constraining, because the answer then eliminates things that are not the answer. All right? It's a bit of a weird one to get your head around sometimes. But people often say, and this bugs me no end, people will say, and you see it a lot on LinkedIn, all these heart-centered people, you can have everything. You can do all this, you can have everything. You can't. If I decide to go for a walk at 10 o'clock in the morning, I cannot then go to the shops at 10 o'clock in the morning. Making a choice then rules out at that moment all of the choices, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, but people need to understand this. Saying yes rules out all other options.
Says no to everything, and knowing what not to do or what opportunities not to pursue, I argue, is always more important than actually. I argue is often more important than knowing exactly what to pursue.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Because it's very difficult to be able to say with certainty the best opportunity to pursue, because you can only operate off the information that you have. And very rarely do we have the full picture of anything.
I'd say we never have the full picture of anything.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well.
There's always always an element of uncertainty.
Hmm.
And to be fair, even if we have full and complete information at that moment, we have almost no information about what may happen in the future to affect that. So there's no certainty.
And we've got biases.
Yeah.
Innate biases. So we've all got constraints, and rather than burying your head in the sand and ignoring them or complaining about them, embrace them, because they will help you, and especially if you've got a team, they will help you make far better decisions. Embrace your budget constraints, embrace the time constraints, embrace your resource constraints, and use that to guard and create boundaries for what you're trying to build. And you'll build something far better, because those constraints, that's what breeds creativity and resourcefulness. And being a business owner, especially at the beginning, is all about being resourceful, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, if you imagine you're sitting at home and you're a freelancer, because freelancers are suffering right now. Well, I did warn them. If they've not taken action before, between me warning them and now, that's on them. But, you're sitting at home, LinkedIn's gone off a cliff for you. You've got no business. So you're sitting there just doing more of what's already not working. Well, that's insane. And I say to you, well, okay, why don't you do some direct mail? It costs £1 to send a letter. And I've only got £10. Okay, send 10 letters. Well, it's not enough. Well, maybe it's not, but it's all you've got. Okay, go to the local print place or print them off yourself. Run off 10 letters and send 10 letters. Save some money on postage and hand deliver them. Okay, and then tomorrow or next week, do 10 more. Because when I started 20 years ago, I sent 23 sales letters, and one of them only got me a contract. And everything else has happened since then because of that, because it kept me going. Now, I could have said, and I didn't have any money at the time, or not much. I can only afford to send 23 letters. That's not enough. I need a bigger market. I won't bother then.
Yeah. It sounds really wanky. Really, really wanky.
Most things you say do.
Yeah, that's also true. That's what happens when you operate at, a higher level of business.
Yeah, fuck off, mate.
You should see it as, once you've identified and embraced your constraints in your situation, I can only send 23 letters, rather than thinking, I can only send 23 letters. That's a positive. That's 23 more letters than you would have sent without realizing the constraints. And rather than running away and putting together a campaign that needs a sample size of, say, at least 1,000 because it's experimental, you're like, no, I can only send 23 letters. So they need to be really good fucking letters. And then you can ask, well, do I send, I know the math in, do I send it 11 and a half? Do I send it 2 letters to 11 and a half people? And it allows you to start asking those questions and, again, coming up with better answers rather than thinking wrongfully you can do everything and everything. And that's exactly what we did when we had our record month.